Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leopard Solutions webinar on critical considerations for a successful law firm merger or combination. I'm Stephanie Marone, and I'm here with a great panel today. We're so happy that despite the summer, you've joined us. We're going to deep dive into a lot of different topics, so I want to make sure not to spend too much time on introductions, but it is important that you know the lay of the land today. I couldn't be happier with the panel that we've assembled. So let's get right into it. I'd love for our speakers to spend a couple seconds just introducing themselves. So Wendy, I think I've done this alphabetically, so forgive me if it's not. Wendy, do you want to take a couple seconds and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Wendy Bernero, the Global Chief Marketing Officer at Baker McKenzie. I've been at a number of firms that have been part of the merger negotiating teams of a number of firms. Also as a consultant, I worked with a lot of firms on both sussing out merger activities as well as on merger integration.
Awesome. Those are my dogs in the background, by the way. I have 2 French Bulldog puppies, and I will try to make them calm down. I took the liberty of putting together some of the firms at which Wendy has been, because we have a really great discussion. So I've worked with Wendy at a number of these firms. And the reason I did this is just to show the depth and breadth. I know we say that term a lot, but we've got a lot to talk about. And Wendy was also a consultant, like she said. So there's a lot to dive into here, but Wendy's probably the smartest person I've ever met, and everything I've ever learned has been through Wendy, actually. So, all right. So, Tom, you can follow that. Tell us about you.
Yes, I will not supplant Wendy as the smartest person you've ever met. My name is Tom Cole. I am proud to be the managing partner of Troutman Pepper. Prior to that, I was the managing partner of Pepper Hamilton, had been in that role since I believe 2013, and proud former Pepper, and now proud to be managing partner of our new combined firm. I think we are now 13 months officially into our merger, and happy to report that things are going really well.
So, perfect segue, Tom. We've got here a couple of slides that I just happened to put together. I'm assuming, Tom, that photo of the happy smiling people was taken pre-COVID.
Yes.
There is a little bit of distancing between you. I wasn't sure if this was like a Photoshop job or if it was, in fact, a real life photo of all of you.
A real photo. I believe we may have been in New York City when we did that, but that was a different time. It was pre-COVID for sure.
Yeah, so feels like so long ago, right? So I am so excited to talk to Tom and Kent about this merger, which pretty extraordinarily closed during the pandemic. And Tom was telling me that it was originally supposed to close April 1st of last year, but they held it back until July because of obvious reasons. I can't even imagine, like I said to you, Tom, like what it was like to assimilate a firm together remotely, get all your employees working remotely. Then you've got 2 systems to merge together, 2 firms, 2 cultures. It's a lot. And so we want to hear all about that. So here's a great quote from you, by the way, that I pulled from your LinkedIn feed. And I think this was, this is your, I guess it's the 1-year anniversary, right? Recently of the merger. So right. I think that's great. So we're excited to talk to you. And again, if anyone has any questions, put them in the Q&A. We'll address the questions at the end. We have a lot to get through, but I definitely will look at those questions and we'll incorporate them. Okay, Laura, tell us about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Leopard. I'm the CEO and founder of Leopard Solutions, and we have been measuring law firm activity and attorneys for almost 20 years. And we've recently been doing a deep dive into merger and acquisition activity and possible outcomes. So I'm really looking forward to what everyone has to say today.
Awesome. Okay, and then just to tell you about me, these are the firms at which I've worked. You'll see there's overlap again with Wendy, but Wendy and I both worked on the merger of McKee Nelson when it was looking for merger partners, and then it merged with Bingham McCutcheon. I left. Wendy said to me, you should go. And she helped me find a job. And I wound up going to the most stable law firm there possibly was, which was Sullivan and Cromwell, which was night and day different. And this was during the financial crisis of 2018. So in 2018, 2019, but we'll talk about what that was like. And, you know, obviously Bingham is no longer with us. The people from Bingham went on to Morgan Lewis. Very interesting time having worked doing that. And I am working currently on a merger of equals with two boutique intellectual property firms. My dogs are really excited about that too, but a very different kind of experience. So these are all the firms at which I've worked. And now I work as a outsourced CMO and social media person for law firms of all sizes, but mostly mid-sized firms. All right, Kent, tell us about you. And I've got a surprise for you, Kent. Wait till you see it.
Oh, don't tempt me. So thank you to Stephanie and Laura and everyone for putting this panel together. I was really flattered to be asked, and I'm glad to be here. My partners and I consult with law firms exclusively. My practice is focused on strategy and on mergers. Our merger practice is about 4 times as busy as it's ever been in 20 years since we've been at this. So a lot happening in the market, and look forward to discussing it with everybody. And thank you again for having me.
Wow. Okay. So, and this, I know this from working with Leopard, this is the hottest job market in 20 years. So, especially on the corporate side too, for associates and lateral talent. So you're saying it's similar on the lateral front in terms of firms looking for merger partners as well.
Yeah, the merger activity has been building, as you know, for years, but it's busier today than it's ever been by a factor of about 4 than it's been in 20 years. Lot of drivers, which we could discuss.
Kent, are you seeing, we'll get into this a little later, but are you seeing firms of all sizes, or is it, is it mostly big firms? Are you seeing also, you mentioned a firm of 60 lawyers, you just worked on a deal.
We advise firms that are outside the MLaw 200. We advised on the combination of Brinks, a terrific IP firm, and Kroll and Mooring that closed last month. And we advise firms that are in the MLaw 10 and a lot in between. There is an almost insatiable desire for most firms to strengthen at scale, improve their quality and performance in areas they're focused on, and a lot have a hard time getting to where they want to go with laterals alone. And that's one of the big drivers of the merger activity that we're seeing.
Okay. And we're going to talk about all of that again. I want to hear your thoughts. And let me just go on to the next slide. Really, Kent and Zeughauser Group are at in the middle of all major mergers. You go back and search Kent and Zeughauser Group on Google, and you will find a mention of them very far back with all major mergers. So this was my little surprise, putting you at the crux of all mergers.
I like it.
Yeah, I will give you that slide so you can use it in your own personal social media. So Kent is also going to talk to us about the Denton strategy. So we hear about Denton's, going into markets, going into states and cobbling up smaller firms and doing lots of interesting merger work. And I actually invited someone from Denton's to be on this panel, but she was on vacation this week. So I, asked Kent to talk a little bit later on about Denton's strategy. And I'd love to hear about, can firms get too big and what happens if you're too big? And so that's something we'll address a little bit later. So there have been a number of unsuccessful mergers throughout the years. So this was an article I pulled that talked about the most spectacular failures in the 2010s. And unfortunately, these firms didn't make it through. And we will talk about some of the challenges involved in law firm mergers as well, so that this does not happen to your firm. One of the ones that we will be looking at a little bit, Wendy, I'm hoping you're going to talk about McKee and Bingham merging together. Unfortunately, I joined right in the middle of when things started to go sour. And unfortunately, Lehman was and Structured Products was the big part of McKee's business. This is unfortunately kind of what happens. A lot of people blame that merger on Bingham's why Bingham failed. Wendy, you'll hopefully get into this and talk to us a little bit about it. She's smiling. Okay, Kent, I just pulled an article that you were in Bloomberg that actually was talking about 26 law firm mergers completed in the first half of this year, with more coming. And you said that it is an exceptionally, so you actually talked about laterals. I didn't pull that quote. You said that when law firms can't do enough when it comes to laterals, they look to merge. And I think that's interesting. And then you said it pays to be open-minded here. So this is a Bloomberg Law article from a couple of days ago, but we're going to talk about all of this, and it's a very, very active hiring market right now. And so, Kent, I think what you were kind of trying to say is that you may not be able to accomplish all of your lateral needs or your growth needs. So acquiring or merging might be the solution for a firm. Yes?
It depends on the firm and its strategy.
Okay.
It's certainly not right for all firms, but for some, the net growth over time isn't enough to get to where they want to go, net of retirements, net of departures. And we could talk more about that.
Okay. And Tom, we're getting some questions for you in the chat already. So think about, Tom, if you could, the biggest surprise that came from doing a merger during COVID. So Tom, we're going to let you think about that, but I've gotten a couple questions for you on that. So, all right. And just yesterday or the day before was Holland and Knight announced that it's wrapped up its merger with Thompson and Knight. By the way, very convenient that the last part of the firm name is Knight. So they do not have to worry about discussing firm name changes, which, by the way, can take a lot of time and effort, and also psychologically can affect a lot of people. I've worked on those kinds of deals where I was mentioning to Tom and Ken, you see the firm name in the lobby come down, and it's very disheartening, it can be very hard for people who were lifers at a firm. So this just happened, showing that, again, there's no slowdown. I will send this, we'll put this in the follow-up, but to anybody who wants a little, primer on marketing strategy during a law firm merger, I put this together based on the things that I've done before. There are so many things to think about. This is just a bullet point list, but I can tell you that, having discussions very early on and having your marketing team be part of the discussion with the target firm, or if it's a combination, we want to be really careful about the nomenclature you use as part of this. There are so many things that you need to take stock of. Upcoming events and sponsorships, there's going to be a lot of duplication of efforts. The language on your website, your pitches and proposals, clients are the most important thing. So talking about how you're going to communicate this to your clients, and then employees, right? So Tom and Kent and I were talking the other day about how to make sure your partners are on board with a merger, because, by the way, what Laura is also going to show us is that some of them stay for the first year or so, but then they may leave depending on what their contracts have. You want to make sure your partners are on board with something like this, because you need them to want to stay at your firm, get excited about this, and then to keep the business there and they don't leave, okay? So all of these things, and then constituencies, your recruits, the law schools, alumni, there's so many different audiences that you need to make sure are communicated with. So again, we're happy to give this as a takeaway as well. All right, Laura, I'm gonna turn this over to you and stop sharing. And if there's any questions, chats, or anything, I'll man those as well. And then we're going to come back to the presenters and get into the discussion. So I'm going to put on my Barbara Walters hat.
That's great. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, let me share my screen and we can begin. So, like most marriages, merger talks begin with high optimism. Many times they succeed, and sometimes they end before they begin, and others just do not end well for the firm overall. So today we're going to look under the covers to discover what can make or break a successful law firm merger. Why merge in the first place, right? Consultants like Kent will tell you that firms really should have a very good reason to merge. It just shouldn't be on a whim or hunting for world domination. There really needs to be a strategic objective for both firms to have a really good combination. And at times, mergers fail before they begin. And this is a really good list of why merger attempts fail. And time after time, article after article, person after person we talk to, we see these 3 reasons bubble to the top. Cultures don't match. There are deal-killing conflicts. And really big one, significant differences in partner compensation and capital debt at the firm. Partner exits can take down a firm, whether they've undergone a merger or not. Once they start leaving, they can really gain steam. We watch this in our growth decline report, and you can too. Once a firm reaches about -25 in headcount, it's really hard to come back from losses of that size. And one thing that makes M&A different in law firms than in other industries is that the partners are all owners of the firm. And if those partners lose faith and jump ship, it can really start a chain reaction. And as partners leave, the remaining partners will be paid less, but their lateral marketability remains the same. So as their pay goes down, there can be further, fertile opportunities at other firms, causing them to jump as well. So in this article, it says about 50% of the mergers, fail. We did a webinar about 5 years ago where we had a guest that said only 20% of law firm mergers succeed. So in that respect, this is doing a bit better. But a disparity in partner income can be one of the biggest risks in these different mergers. Concessions have to be made on both sides, but it still can ruffle feathers even after that agreement has been made. So to help firms measure the risks and possible success of mergers, we built our M&A tool in our Leopard BI product to help firms identify all the issues mentioned in those articles that we just looked at. And we use AI and past mergers to judge how well we think that merger will go based on attrition and other factors. So it identifies possible risks that should be assessed. And we're quickly just going to look at these data points, and then we're going to apply them to a past merger to see how well it measures up in the final analysis. So in our product, you select a primary firm and a target firm, as I did here. Our primary firm is much larger. That's almost 1,300 people. Their growth decline number in headcount is a positive 1%. Our target firm has negative growth decline of 10%. And in our Leopard Law Firm Index, which is our own index of sort of health of the firm, the target firm is in sort of the fair position, while our primary firm is in the very good position. And it sort of breaks it down for you by associate partner counsel. So our projected retention rate of this possible merger is at 64%. There'll be 3 new locations. These are small locations in Algiers, Fort Worth, Monterey, Mexico. And we're predicting attrition by measuring the success of past mergers that are of a similar nature. And then we're able to predict how many might go at signing, how many might leave, in that first year period, and then second year, third year, fourth year. So there's a declining rate of departures, which is actually pretty good. If we look at the cultural cards of this combination, we see in this instance, gender is pretty similar. So no issue there. There is a difference in ethnic diversity, and our target firm is less diverse than our primary firm. We also see a difference in schools. So here we see a larger group at actually our target firm that went through the 11 through 20 schools. They have a good amount that went to the top 10, but there is a disparity there, as well as in our JD breakdown of people at the firm. We'll see in our target firm, the largest group of attorneys is actually in the oldest bundle. So that might pose some sort of risk for this particular proposed merger. So when they merge, their biggest growth is going to be in litigation, followed by corporate and real estate. They're also going to be picking up a lot of energy attorneys as well as tax attorneys. So if this is where they're looking to grow, this might make sense. As for locations, we see that the largest group are going to go into Texas, Dallas and Houston will get a big boost. And then there's a small group moving into New York, a small group moving into Austin. And then those are those other offices where they'll pick up a few attorneys. If we look at clients represented, I can look at the list of my primary firm, then I can look at the list of my target firm. And here we found 18 similar clients that were represented by both firms in 2019. And we also want to look at the financials. So here it's not surprising. Our primary firm has larger profits per partner than our target firm. Revenue by lawyer is higher, sales are higher. So this might be an area I would want to pay attention to. So now we are going to look at a merger that happened back in 2015. And we're going to look at all those items we just looked at and see how well, this merger has done so far. So who stayed, who left? If you see this in our M&A tool, we're going to show that at this point in time, they have successful retention of this merger of 40%. So let's look to see who stayed, who left, what possible areas that we could have predicted where there would be risk to this particular merger. So we're going to start with the news. We're going to go back in our hotspot news, and we see in October in 2013 a vote is scheduled on a merger. Then 1 month later, it's called off. Departures begin just a few months later, and they pick up the pace toward mid-2014. And 2014, we still see some big groups leaving that firm. And then we get here, they've agreed to merge in 2015. But the departures actually continue. So here we see more groups leaving that original firm. And then right before the merger, we see a group of 13 leave. So lots of people still exiting. And then we have problems after the merger as well. So now let's look at some pre-merger data and let's see if we can see possible risks, right? So this is the location map pre-merger. And McKenna does not really bring a single new location to this map. They're duplicating offices with large increases proposed in the Atlanta office. You see San Diego, San Francisco, and DC, but they're not bringing a new office to the table with this merger. Gender looks to be very similar. Ethnic diversity looks to be very similar. So there's really not much risk there. When we look at our school rankings, there are some differences here. So in the top 10 school group, there's a disparity of 12% for partners, just 2% for associates. And then there's 11% disparity for partners in the under top 200 schools. Might not be a big risk, but that's where the map starts to differ a little bit. The distribution by JD year was not that different, although McKenna leadership actually skewed a bit older than the Denton's firm. So there's associate and here's our partners. So if you search the web, you'll see that McKenna was once over 500 attorneys strong. As we look through the firm's history, our data starts to show where those big exits occurred. So here it is in 2013, definitely over 500 people there. In 2014, we're beginning to see some larger exits at the firm. Was it that merger that didn't happen that caused them to look for the exit? By the time of the merger in 2015, there were only 306 active attorneys left at McKenna, and actually 301 attorneys actually moved into Denton's. And according to what we saw earlier, that exodus really continued after the merger. So we can look at that as well. So after the merger occurred, we see, now blue stands for year zero. So this is before they hit the 1 year mark, 22 associates and 12 partners. Year one, this is after they hit the 1 year mark, right? We had 14 associates leave and 33 partners exit. After that hit the 2 year mark, 11 associates, 35 partners headed for the door. So those exits specifically in that year 2, year 3 would have undercut the success of this merger significantly. Now I'm just going to concentrate on partner losses, and now we're going to look by location. So remember where we had the greatest gains? It was Atlanta, DC, San Diego, San Francisco. Look at all those partner departures. Really in year 1, year 2, that's significant losses. So if they were trying to grow those offices, this really undercut that growth. If we look at the departures by ethnic diversity and gender diversity, we really see that white males exited at a much larger rate than the ethnically diverse and gender diverse. And if we look at the financials compared before the merger, not a surprise that Denton's revenue is higher. But what is a surprise is that the RPL, the PPP, and the compensation average per partner was all higher at our target firm, at McKenna. Was all higher at McKenna. That could have fueled that partner exodus once those firms combined, if they weren't happy with the compensation that they'd agreed to. And if we look at revenue, between 2013 and 2014, Denton saw explosive growth in revenue, but they also had explosive growth in size. McKenna, on the other hand, was flat with attorney numbers, even sort of lost a few attorneys, but they still outright Denton's for those partner financials. So that would have been a bit of a risk. So if we look at all the losses after the merger, we're saying a successful retention rate of 40% because we're taking into consideration how long people stayed at the firm, not just the number who left. But if we look at who left, 225 people from that 301 that went over to Denton's have left the firm. That's a really big number. So we came to the 40% successful retention by looking at they left at year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. But that's a pretty startling number. And that's what I have to share about looking at all the different problems that a merger could incur. So we looked at a possible merger, and we looked at a merger that's already occurred, dissecting all the departures and how it may have impacted that firm. It certainly impacted the effect of that merger.
That's awesome. Laura, I have a question here for you, which I think we're going to have to get back to the person, but someone asked if those departures were to other mega firms or to firms similar in size to McKenna. So basically, did they leave to avoid big law, or did they go to a similar size firm as McKenna? So I think we'd have to look into that a little bit more to tell you. I don't know if you have any thoughts to add on that.
Well, I think there was some of both. You can get more detailed information just by running a report in Leopard and clicking on the button that can drill down to those attorneys. But there was a mixture of both. It wasn't all or nothing. So there were people that left that went to large law firms. There were ones that went to, and ones that sort of disappeared off the board. We don't know where they went. And then there were some that ended up in-house as well. But I can look to see, we're going to do a deeper dive on this particular merger because we have a lot of data on it. And that can be a data point that we include in that deeper dive.
Okay, awesome. What's the group's thoughts on this? What do you guys think? Any surprises here?
But just a maybe one point is there are a number of things Laura said that make me want to know why. So I don't know why Denton's chose to merge with McKenna. What were they looking for? How are they improving their value proposition, their offering to their clients, their service deliveries? It clearly wasn't a geographic play. McKenna historically, I think, had a very strong government contracts practice. Is that what they were trying to build? Be interesting to look at the practice groups that partners left from. But some of the lessons around this is a lot of the mergers that have failed have been around how they've been communicated. I mean, if you look at what's going on right now with Holland and Knight and Thompson Knight, the early announcement of that merger before it was closer to a done deal, which sometimes is strategy sometimes just happens because it leaks out, actually puts the firm that's being acquired in a weaker position and causes people to vote with their partners, to vote with their feet. Sometimes, changing the mix of what's going to come out in a merger at the end state is the larger firm that's basically doing the acquiring, or are both of them going to achieve their goals if people aren't on board. It's that getting people on board and making sure they're going to stick with it. And then, maybe the only piece is that if you really do a merger and it's focused, so let's pretend that Denton's, and actually, Kent, you might know the actual answer to this, but if you were buying it because you wanted a stronger government contracts practice, that's a real goal of yours, you really wanted to expand in that area, then how do you make sure the rest of the firm doesn't feel neglected? Sometimes in mergers, the larger firm makes it perfectly clear that they really wanted these 30 lawyers and the rest of you were nice, but all the benefits of the merger are going to a small group or being integrated into leadership roles and firmly embraced, and the rest of them, sometimes you wonder, and Kent and Tom, you're involved with this every day, Tom, you've just been through this. Sometimes you have to look at the people that are leaving. Sometimes the firms want some of these groups of people to leave. And so, I, as a business development and marketing professional, I always sort of look behind how much of that was intent, how much of that was, there really was just a small group that they were buying. The rest was nice to have. I think McKenna at that point really needed to merge. So I think Denton's was in a pretty dominant position to get what it wanted. But Tom, Ken, thoughts?
I think, Wendy, you make a really smart point that to make heads or tails of departures, you really need to know were the departures regrettable or not, were they wanted or not. And it would be frequent in the context of a merger and without a merger that firms shrink to grow stronger, shrink to grow more profitable by design regularly. And most firms do that on an ongoing basis. And sometimes to make a merger work or to get what they really want out of a merger, that's the game plan going in, sometimes agreed by the firms. And so I think it's hard to make heads or tails of departures without knowing the intent. I think also for any given merger, to know whether or not it achieved the objectives of the firms, I think you need to know, to Wendy's point, what the objective was, and then also what were the available alternatives to achieve their objectives, and what are the advantages and disadvantages to those versus the one they chose. And lastly, what would have happened if they didn't combine? In other words, for the target firm, sometimes there would be a brighter future without combining, sometimes not, and it would be a darker future. So I think it's very challenging to size up a combination without knowing the answers to those questions. And of course, the options, most firms, they want to be a stronger version of themselves. They want to improve. And usually that requires some growth in areas on which they're focused. And the growth can be organic, laterals, groups of laterals, or a combination. Those are the options. And so increasingly firms put all those options on the table and weigh them against each other. Many firms are doing that. But to know, was this the right deal? Was it successful? You really need to be able to get behind the curtain, Wendy, to your point. So I think that was a very, I agree fully with that observation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Stephanie. I would just echo that. There was a lot of data and a lot of helpful data in that analysis, Laura, but I echo Wendy and Kent's points that you really would have to get under the hood of what was going on at McKenna as a goal of combining with Denton's, and what was going on with Denton's, what goals did they want to achieve by joining with McKenna. It's clear Denton's wants to be a large, dominant player by headcount, not just in North America, but beyond. And what the thought process was at McKenna, obviously I can't speak to that, but it's important. And it was certainly important, in our situation, to make sure we knew where our partners were. What type of growth were they open for? willing to embrace where were they, and to meet them where they were, to go and, drive a strategy of any type of growth or a status quo strategy and have that be out of step with where your partners are isn't really a recipe for success. So I think the first point, and I'm not saying that, and I would imagine McKenna and Denton's did this for this particular merger, but speaking for us, we analyzed where we were, how we faced the market. We decided that, the partnership really liked working with each other and enjoyed the collaboration that we had and the firm we had, but that the partners were open to growth in all its forms, small acquisitions, larger combinations, and of course, even something as we now know, as significant and transformative as combining with Troutman. So it was important that the partners were on board with that, and Tom Gallagher, as chair of our firm, did an excellent job in that regard and guiding us through that, but also that it made sense for our clients. With partners and clients, that's really what drives the firm forward. We wanted to make sure that we were in step with that, and that was important. So our partners were open to change, and change can create anxiety, but change can also unleash a lot of opportunities. And we've certainly seen that.
Yeah.
So let me just add though, Laura, that technology is brilliant because I have literally spent hundreds of hours putting together what you just pulled across and sorted. I remember working with Zeughauser Group on a potential merger for McKenzie, and we were trying to create a model of what Baker McKenzie and McKenzie would look like as a unified firm, and literally hundreds of hours. Stephanie was involved in this, went into, is that really something worth pursuing? We did that with other firms too. It's actually how I got to know Baker McKenzie so well. You can do that with the push of a button. The important thing is it tells you it doesn't give you the answers, but it tells you what questions you might want to ask, right? And that's incredibly important to help us move more quickly, because the more quickly you can get through these research and investigation stages, the more chance you have around managing the communications and actually getting a deal done. So it's incredibly helpful.
It tells you that someone's going to be a potential partner. What now the important thing is, are you the right cultural fit? Do your clients really make sense for us? And do we get along as people? Do we get along as a firm? Do we share, again, the same values? And so let's go to that. So I'd like to talk to folks who've been through mergers. So Tom, you're going through one. Wendy, you've been through them. When you're looking for a potential merger partner, and let's say the financials and the client mix makes sense, when it comes to everything else, when it comes to the people, when it comes to getting also the internal buy-in, getting your partners to say, okay, this is something we want to do. Because again, there are lots of people who feel very strongly about the firm name. I'm sure the Pepper Hamilton name was very important to people, especially people like, you worked there, I think your whole career, Tom. And, for other firms, that is something, it's hard to see the name disappear. So how do you get past this is a good match, I've got to now get my fellow partners on board and go to the next step? What do I do?
I'll start, Kent, and I'll let you weigh in at a much more broader level. But for us, it was communication. We had to just make sure that we were communicating again and again with our partners in large groups and in small groups about why this potential combination made sense for us, why this was a natural next step in our evolution together, not as Pepper Hamilton, but as partners, and what that meant in combining with a larger, what was not necessarily an equal firm, in fact, a firm that had more headcount than we do and was a little larger than us. All those things like names and, your email address and signage, those people identify and resonate with that. And we were, Pepper Hamilton was a proud firm doing well, and certainly didn't have to merge. But in combining with Troutman, we saw a firm that was more like us than different, one that had the same values that we did. And while, name was important, and both our names are in the combined firm, and, color and letterhead and website design, all of that can feel different. But those nostalgic things, I don't want to underestimate them at all, because that's what was part of the glue that would hold the firm together, how you feel about the place you show up in every day. But the important things were, what opportunities did this present for us, our partners, our associates, our clients, importantly, and our people. And was it hard at times? Sure. And doing it in a pandemic made it even harder. But we were excited by all, I hate the word synergy, but I'll use it, all the synergies that we felt across the aisle at Troutman. And we started working together on resource centers before we even officially merged on July 1st. And when we saw that energy at the practice level coming together, all of those other things that are absolutely important, because they help you define how you feel and how you feel connected to the firm, they didn't trump the upside of the combination. And we were respectful, and we listened, and Troutman and Pepper listened to each other about what was important, and we decided to address that collaboratively. And those 3 months from when we were supposed to merge on April 1st to when we finally merged on July 1st were occasioned by, as we all remember, the pandemic that sent us all to our basements, kitchens, and attics in the middle of March in 2020, with fingers crossed that we could still function. We could still work with and collaborate with each other, stay connected, that our technology would hold up. And to answer the question, what was the biggest surprise of merging in a pandemic? How well it worked, frankly. That was the surprise for me, was, yeah, there were challenges, but the fact that it worked that well was encouraging, and I think kind of was affirmation of the business case to come together. And having those 3 months between April 1 and July 1, pardon me for the sports analogy, it was like a preseason for our merger before the regular season started, because we had to come together on all of the issues that every law firm was facing with the pandemic and remote work, and how to get technology. On top of that, how to get technology not just working, but bringing systems together, and conflicts, and bringing 2 fairly large organizations together. And we made those easy and hard decisions together in a collaborative way, which I think was, if we needed a proving ground, I don't know that we did, but we had it in those 3 months, and proof of concept came through loud and clear, and allowed us to go ahead and decide, yeah, let's just do it. Even though we're remote, even though we're together alone, let's merge in the middle of a pandemic, and get a virtual Zoom call and toast, raise our glasses on July 1 to the merger. So I'm rambling, but all of those things are important, Stephanie, and we didn't want to dismiss any feelings about them.
What was the most surprising thing about the merger process?
Again, I'll say that how well we were able to get through it in a pandemic.
Okay, that's a good enough answer for me.
Yeah, it was and we were fortunate that we were able to get together in parts of the partnership as we were coming together and learning about each other. So there was that some, what I'll call 2019 connectivity that we all remember fondly, where we could actually get together and, not worry about virus and spread. So there was that, but a lot of the firm that had been scheduled to come together and meet didn't get a chance to do that because of the pandemic. So we were doing it like we're doing it now, learning about each other on screen, and it worked really well.
And Kent and Wendy, thoughts from you guys on the same topic, and also like in terms of measuring success of a merger, they are a year out. It's also been an extraordinary time period, right? We are also in an extraordinary job market. Some say you should measure the success of a merger 2, 3, 5 years down the line. Some also say, what are the success criteria? Yes, I understand. But what would you guys say, in terms of, and I know the objectives, like we said, can change from firm to firm, but if you're looking to find the right partner, and then to measure whether it was a success, what would you say firms should be thinking about?
Wendy, would you like to start or would you like me to go?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so, I think step one, it usually makes sense for a firm to decide, if it hasn't already, what are its aspirations for the future? Ideally, a shared vision for the future that the partners have on what they want the firm to achieve over time, how they want it to be distinctive in the market, what do they want it to be known for, in what areas will it be known for excellence? And then, are there combinations that fast forward progress towards achieving that shared vision? And if so, how do those compare? How do the advantages and disadvantages to those opportunities compare to not combining with a firm and other ways of getting there? And so it usually makes sense, if a merger is something that a firm wants to consider to fast forward the progress, develop some criteria. What criteria would another firm need to meet to be considered by you? Criteria in terms of its practice strengths, sector strengths, geographic strengths, and so forth. And get some consensus in the firm on what those criteria are. And then apply those shared criteria to the universe of firms that might meet them, and develop a list of firms that are worthy of evaluation. And then prioritize that list and start to learn more about the ones that are highest priority. And so then, fast forwarding from there to, if you actually combine with another firm, to your question, how do you measure the success? It usually makes sense to have a plan for the combined firm that includes a shared vision and goals necessary to achieve the vision. And then you would measure success against the achievement of the plan for the combined firm, the same way you would for a single firm. If you didn't combine, you'd have a plan, and you'd measure your success against achieving the plan. So there's all kinds of goals that firms develop that they hope to achieve together, but for revenue and expense savings and accelerated growth in shared areas of focus. And so those might be among the goals in a firm's plan, in the combined firm's plan, that you'd measure success against.
Okay, and should you wait a certain period of time? Would you say that 2-year, 3-year mark? Would you say if a lot of partners leave, that's probably an indication that it wasn't a success? Or does it depend more on who left? Because sometimes firms want to merge because there's certain aspects of the firm. Maybe I want a Miami office or a Houston office, but I got to take everybody, right? And there's certain low-hanging fruit partners that may leave after time, and no one knows if that was a discussion you had at the firm saying it's going to be a mutual thing, right? People don't know what's actually going on behind that curtain. So we should look maybe at other criteria. It's not just about the numbers, I guess, is sort of what I'm saying. It's about
Definitely.
It's who.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we actually want people to leave firms.
Very much so. Most firms are trying to balance being competitive with peers and aspirational peers. They're trying to balance relative scale, relative profitability, relative quality, and culture also. And that's a balance, and those interests sometimes compete. You could get a lot more profitable overnight, but at the expense of your scale and your culture, perhaps. Or you could get a lot bigger and scale overnight at the expense of your profitability and your quality and your culture. And so it's a balance of those factors, is what I would say. And you are going to develop a plan that creates a better firm and something stronger than either of the firms could be separately. And so I think developing a plan, managing to the high performers in the combined firm, all really important. And I don't think it's easy to tell in a merger context or without. If there are departures, it's hard to know if that's a good thing or not without knowing whether they were wanted or unwanted departures by the firm.
There's a lot more behind the scenes. So Wendy, what's your thought, on measuring success, or just how to know it might be a success, or your experience with having been through one of these or multiples?
So I think the early success that you measure is are you implementing on your integration strategy, right? Have you agreed? Do you have joint business plans? Do you have joint client plans? Have budgets been merged? Are people working collaboratively together? And all that requires planning, right? If you have a client team program, have you added people from each other's firms to them? Have you merged those programs so that they're the same? Does it feel like it's one unified firm instead of, I remember one of the big issues, hilariously to me, in the McKee Nelson Bingham merger was that the senior partners at McKee Nelson used to get pretty much anything they wanted, right? Smaller with 200 lawyer firm, et cetera. So one of the partners had 2 waste baskets and I don't know, 2 printers in his office, and Bingham was completely different. It was everyone gets, rationed 1 garbage can for their whatever, and you practically need to go to the chair of the firm to get a second one, let alone a second printer or any of those things. And it's amazing how small things like that and expectations over small things can impact people's desire to be there, or so then they go outside the system. Can I get closer to the new leadership group and win my way? And is it really, did you merge with that kind of firm anyway, that there's roles for everybody but not for a certain set? Or do you really understand the rules of what your day-to-day life are going to be living in? So tiny example, but you really need to be on, like, what are the expectations of the partners, of the people in both firms, and how is that going to be sorted? If you looked at the Hogan and Levels merger, when they combined departments, they had 2 department heads for every business professionals department. And it was really like, when it was announced that that's how they were doing it, it was sort of perceived as a duel to the death of the, right? How you put 2 people in leadership roles and everybody was like, well, one of them won't be here in 3 years. But that also had an impact on the partners, right? It created this, well, I go to my person when I want something, and then, right? And so, you have to build it so you're aware of all the expectations, and then you need to measure, are you really living up to all of those pieces of integration that you put in place? And are you starting to realize that it's hard to have mergers are so expensive, it's hard to, I think, show any results, immediately. So actually, frankly, it's really important. And Tom, I'm sure you're doing this now. And Kent, I remember you're advising this on some of the things we've worked on together. You've got to have success stories, right? Because lawyers will find the I can't have 2 garbage can stories wind up like driving the narrative, as opposed to, look at this work we won because the new capabilities from both went to an existing client, or both of us represent this client and now we've expanded the relationship more broadly. So those kinds of stories, even when you don't have success factors, you can't see it in the numbers. In fact, the numbers sometimes go down in the first year just because of costs of putting the merger together. So you might not have the best financial results right away, but you've got to keep, reassuring people and repeating the good parts of the merger and why to use their awful word, synergies, the synergies are resulting in moving you down a good path.
Wendy, that's really well said. And we, in our early discussions, it wasn't that we had, while we were still evaluating the opportunity, integration as the first thing that we wanted to tackle, but integration started happening as the discussions were happening, trying to visualize how the firms would come together, where there were overlapping strengths and where there were complementary strengths. Legacy Pepper, and we're gonna bury the word legacy very soon. Another peeve on the merger front, to try and break free from what used to be not what Troutman was or Pepper was, but what really is a new thing, which is Troutman Pepper. And I think that's an important piece to keep in mind in any of the combinations. And that goes to your point, Stephanie, about, letting go. How do you let go? Well, let's gaze forward and focus on the reasons we came together. And that integration should start early. And we were able to combine in a way that had a firm more solidly in the Northeast with a firm more solidly in the Southeast, with industry strengths that were overlapping in some areas, but different, health science at one firm, energy, real estate, private equity. And then together, what does that look like and how does it work? And for us to be now in 8 of the 10 largest legal markets, we also know that, there might be some holes yet to fill, for an energy firm, not in Texas, for a health science focused firm, not as robust as we might like to be in Boston. So there are still to-dos as we come together and integrate still, with the latest news in a pandemic. But while we're doing that, we've really tried to pay attention to the machine running well in the interim, and having the firm perform well in that first year together was affirmation of the business case for the merger. And it's really a credit to our partners and our staff across the firm to do what they did. And back to the quote, that sounded like a really good quote I gave, Stephanie. I can't remember what it was.
You did. I show it again.
Credit goes to them to do this kind of against all odds in light of what was happening, we know, in people's personal lives, with caring for elderly parents and children, and maybe getting themselves impacted by the virus or loved ones impacted by the virus. And even with those, bricks in our backpack, how well the firm performed together was really, really remarkable. And, we're excited about next steps, but that culture was key. That respect for each other was key. And people felt like it was worth whatever administrative challenges there might be in coming together, because it made sense for the high performers. It made sense for our clients. And that's, thanks to the leadership teams for pulling that all together.
Can we talk a little bit about, so I want to talk about 3 things and we're running out of time. One is clients. How do you what's the best way to communicate this to clients? Make sure that they, know that, first of all, both firms are in good standing, that this isn't a merger because of even if it is, that you're not communicating that this is a merger because of any issue related to maybe the firm's position in the market, finances, et cetera, that they're not going to lose the client service, especially if it's a smaller firm merging with a bigger firm, if they're comfortable and feel like they've gotten a lot of client, hands-on client service, culture changes, et cetera. Wendy, you want to start off with this one? Because I think tantamount to anything is to ensure that your clients are above and beyond, happy and are front and center with everything that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Tom, you're probably best to answer this because you're doing this now, but be clear and transparent with your clients. Your most important clients probably need to be part of the discussions. If we need to be knowledgeable about what you're doing, you need to have trusted relationships so you can have those discussions, make sure they're comfortable with it. And probably right after doing conflicts, you ought to be thinking about, here's what we're thinking about in terms of a growth strategy, et cetera. What do you think about this? I mean, it's just incredibly important, because maybe more important than losing partners is losing clients. I know those things are connected, but they're not always connected, right? You could lose a big institutional client who's unhappy because you merged with a firm that they don't feel that they don't have a positive view of. So, I mean, to Tom's point, communication is key, and I think transparency and honesty with your clients is key. But Tom, you're doing that because you must be still engaged in the making sure clients are comfortable part of the merger.
Yeah.
Well said, Wendy. It's it's communication is key, and you have to have it. All should be viewed through the client lens ultimately. Yes, partners, and we're all internally focused on that and making sure that glue stays together as part of any analysis and combination. But it has to make sense for the clients, and clients aren't. It's the rare client that's going to pop up and say, "Oh, you merged. I see you merged. That's great, because now we can do this with you or that for you." It's really on the partners and the firms that are merging to drive that narrative and make sure that we're reaching out to them. In the first instance, Wendy, as you said, to make sure that it's not a dislocating move and problematic, and you'd want to know that. But also that here's what the combination brings, whether it's more scale, whether it's different geographies, whether it's more depth, whether it's, maybe new industry expertise that, you hadn't had before, and continuing to listen to them. And Kent and I talked about this a number of times how important it is to be known for things in this highly competitive market, to be able to articulate that, and also to make sure that you're listening to your clients, which is that's a garden that needs continuous attention for sure.
Kent, is there anything you would give any advice that's different to small and mid-sized firms who are looking for a merger partner?
Well, so first of all, the small and mid-sized firms are highly desirable, particularly if they're in geographies, practices, and sectors that are areas that larger firms or similarly sized firms want to grow in and where they can command their rates. And so small and mid-sized firms often have more options than they think they do. It's very hard for most larger firms to grow on their own, exclusively organically with laterals. So the other option is combining with smaller firms. It's very hard to find ones, though, that command the other firm's rates and quality and client mix and mix of work. And so I think the smaller firms really benefit from not just reactively taking phone calls from whoever dials them up and asks if they want to talk, but instead, the smaller firms and mid-sized firms, they benefit from getting in the driver's seat, deciding what their criteria are that another firm would need to meet to be considered by them. What strengths does the other firm need to bring to the table? Practices, geographies, sectors, and then deciding, okay, based on our criteria, can we get some buy-in for those criteria among our partners? And can we identify firms that meet our criteria? And can we get to know some of them and see what the cultural fit is? We believe culture eats strategy for breakfast. So no matter how elegant it may look on paper, the culture, that really needs to work. And there's ways that we go about testing that and helping the cultures get to know each other and see where the compatibilities are and where bridges may need to be made. So I think the smaller firms, kind of to boil it down, they should get in the driver's seat, decide what works for them, and then identify the firms and get to know them. And they often have more options and leverage than they think they have. And often firms call us and others for help with that and are surprised at how much they can do in the way of talking to various firms, getting to know them, and they're often in more demand than they realize.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, Ken, we have another question. There's the Denton's one that I proposed to you in the beginning, and then I'm going to see if there are any questions from the audience. Can a firm get too big and, maybe wants to acquire too many firms, and maybe that goes with the Denton strategy, but this was specifically asked about that. But yeah, when do you say, okay, we don't need to merge with another firm or keep acquiring? I just got an American Lawyer update while we were on the phone, while we're on the webinar, that says that Fenimore Craig acquires Denver trial firm as it plots continued expansion in the West. So while we're on this webinar, there's firms merging as we speak. So merger activity is continuing right live while we're on this program.
So I agree. It's active at this moment, and it'll continue. There will be more. When can a firm get too big? I don't think we've seen that happen yet. I think it depends on a firm's plan and what it takes to achieve it, what its aspirations are. Does it define its markets geographically, practice-wise, sector-wise, or a combination of those things? And what does it take to be dominant in areas in which it's chosen to focus? I think firms benefit from dominating some areas that they focus on, being the best or among the best, and being a magnet for the best talent and clients in those areas and being distinctive for them. And so, getting there is challenging. I would say, you asked about Denton's. I think like all firms, Denton's has advantages and some would say disadvantages. I personally give the people who have created Denton's a lot of credit for what they've done in a short amount of time. That's not so easy to do. And, I would also say that their strategy in the U.S., their golden spike strategy that they've talked about publicly, I think it deserves credit for being innovative. It's very unusual. My perception is that Denton's tries to give the best of both worlds for firms that might join them. On the one hand, benefiting from a common brand and an ability to share work across a global platform, shared expenses on the back end. On the other hand, an ability to keep your partnership agreement, keep your governance, keep your approach to comp. And if you boil down what's distinctive about the model, it is at least one of the things is a partner in a firm that joins with Dentons and Golden Spike is a partner of two firms. You remain a partner of your current firm and you join a new firm that Dentons has created. I think it's too early to tell how that will ultimately play out, but it's very innovative. It's unusual. And I think some of what they're doing looks a little bit more like the Big Four approach to growth and less like most law firms grow. And, you know, we'll see, but it's very innovative and unusual. I give them a lot of credit for what they've accomplished so far.
Yeah, when you said that, I don't think a firm could be too big, except that our current ways of managing and leading law firms, you can grow to an extent that our current leadership, management, and governance systems don't work once a firm gets too big. And so looking at kind of the more federation model, as I think you were referring to, Kent, that a KPMG has, and really, which actually gives the individual units that join the federation a lot less power and control, and a clear, this is what you get and this is what you get, which may be the Golden Spike model that Dentons is heading towards. But we need a different model. If law firms are going to keep growing, if law firms are going to keep getting bigger, there needs to be a way of organizing them so you don't have, you know, literally hundreds of partners around the world who are basically owners of the organization and can make their own decisions. And that's the way some of the large firms are organized now. And I do think there's a size at which that becomes really difficult to manage and really difficult to achieve meaningful goals for a firm.
Yeah. So I know we're a little bit over, so I'm just going to ask you each to tell us, you know, this has been an extraordinary period in the legal market the last 18 months. I think a big inflection point for firms, consultants, et cetera. What's been, you know, it doesn't have to be necessarily on mergers, but I'm curious from all of your vantage points, what's been maybe the biggest aha moment or a biggest surprise or change in the industry, or maybe you can answer it any which way you want. What do you think is going to happen in our industry in 2022? If you could predict things based on where you sit. Laura, do you want to start?
Well, our biggest surprise has been how quickly the job market rebounded. You know, our job program doesn't monitor every firm, but we monitor the ones we can for job openings. And there are over 10,000 openings, whereas before, even in the height of, you know, we had maybe 7,000 jobs in there. It's really astounding. And I think July 2020, we had 3,000 jobs in there, and now there's over 10,000. I mean, that is enormous. That is enormous. And as we look at some of, well, all the lateral hire boom, right? It does make sense that as laterals are harder to get, that smaller mergers may sort of assuage that need at the other firm. I do think we will see some of that, but I think at some point we're going to run out of viable merger candidates for a lot of these firms because they're merging like crazy. Laterals are moving like crazy. So it's really volatile. It'll be very interesting to see when the market begins to settle down. Everyone's trying to make up for lost time right now. So they're hiring people as best they can. I do think at some point that will settle down a bit, but it hasn't yet. So that's what we're watching on a daily basis.
Yeah, and to that point, a lot of my very first job in law firms was setting up an alumni relations program 20 years ago for Paul Weiss. And now I'm doing that work and recruiting marketing strategy. So I would say for those firms that aren't thinking about having a specific recruiting marketing strategy to attract laterals at every level, you need to be doing that. And it's not enough to just rely on being a good firm and having a good name on the door. Your lawyer, candidates are not necessarily only looking at compensation. They're looking at culture. They're looking at flexibility with work from home. They're looking at a lot of other factors. So you need to market your firm. And alumni can help you do that, so can recruit. So that's been a big part of my work in the last, I would say, 3 months. being asked to do recruiting marketing strategies. So
And
interesting.
retention is also going to be really important. Where do these laterals come from? They come from other firms.
Yeah, and
They
if
could be
you
coming
have,
from your firms if you're not playing defense at your firm.
if your diverse associates are the most at risk. Your diverse corporate associates, year 3 through 5, are very much at risk. So know that and hold on to them. And think of, Laura said this to me, everyone is your competitor. So big firms, you can poach from the small firms, but vice versa. And there's a lot going on there. Tom, any inflection points, personal for you, thoughts, anything, that sort of has changed you since the pandemic?
Yeah,
Industry.
it's just a fascinating time. I mean, I think the pace of change is really, it's so fast now that, you send an email that will just take the Delta variant. Everybody was ready for a return to office, maybe feeling a little more normal in the fall. And now we're starting to see, well, maybe that needs to be revisited. So I think all of those muscles that we had to overwork that maybe weren't used so much before, adaptability and flexibility and empathy, I think will continue to be in much need going forward as we figure it all out. And, to Laura's point, I don't know where the resting place will be or if there'll be a resting place. What we've tried to say to folks is we're still working towards some office return, but I'm hopeful, and maybe this is aspirational, that we can return to a workplace that's better than the one we left.
Mm-hmm.
More tech assisted, more flexible, still focused on all the things we need, and with an ability to collaborate and learn with each other, particularly at the junior level, because I do think that's still critically important. This is great and technology has been fantastic, but I do think we've lost something by not being able to be in person the way we used to be, and figuring that all out as the talent war rages, certainly top of mind for us. But I'm confident we'll figure it out. And I don't
Absolutely. And Wendy, from your vantage point, what are your thoughts?
I think that in the next normal, in the new normal, we're moving into it. Law firms are going to finally hear their clients and start delivering solutions instead of renting lawyers and selling technical expertise. I think that's going to be the biggest transition. I think that's going to change who people want to merge with and what lawyers they want to join their firm and how they organize themselves in a really compelling way.
Mm-hmm. Kent?
I think segmentation in the market's going to accelerate a lot. And that is partially because higher performing firms will continue to benefit from compounding, and the gap in their performance and the rest of the pack will continue to widen. When we work with firms and they ask us about the future and we advise on their strategy, something we often will go through with them is we'll say, let's look at the last 10 years of data on how many lawyers have you interviewed, how many have you hired. Let's break that out by practice, type of lawyer, and city. And then also over the last 10 years, net of retirements and other attrition, what's your net growth broken out, practice, city, type of lawyer. And then we say, so if you do the same thing again over the next 10 years in terms of your net growth, does that allow you to achieve your strategy, be as competitive as you need to be with your peers and aspirational peers? Almost every time the answer is no. And this includes many large, highly profitable, high-performing firms. The answer is no, the market's changing too much. We can't just keep doing what we're doing. And so for some, that'll mean sharpening their strategy and having a more clear sense of their centers of excellence, their points of differentiation. Others, it may mean considering combinations. There's, the largest firm has only 6% market share. That's Kirkland by gross revenue. There's miles and miles to go for more consolidation. I think we'll continue to see that happen for firms that want to accelerate their progress. I guess the last thing I'd say is that we're within sight of a point where there is a group of firms that will have a talent advantage based on how much they're able to pay their people, starting with their associates. The chair of an AmLaw 10 firm, highly profitable firm, called a couple weekends ago and he said, we're at 205, like the top of the market, but what would you think if we go to 305? And I said, I wouldn't do that because that's going to be really expensive, got a lot of associates, and you're going to get matched, and then you won't be distinct quickly. But I think, and I don't think that'll happen right away, but I think the point is there is a group of firms that will be able to set themselves apart on comp at a point where most of the market won't match. And then it will be up to other firms to attract the best people, in part by being the winning team in some areas they choose to focus on, not just pay the most. And so I think that segmentation, it's been happening, it's accelerating, and I see it continuing to accelerate because of compounding, if nothing else, over the next couple of years.
That's fascinating to me, especially as someone who works with mid-size and small firms where compensation isn't necessarily the, obviously the draw, but if the gap becomes that big, then they are going to have a harder time finding talent to join their ranks than they would if a firm goes up that percentage. So how this all is going to shake out is going to be interesting. Know that mergers are a tool that firms have, as are lateral group acquisitions, which is something I see a lot of people continuing to do. Everyone wants a corporate, small corporate group in M&A right now, or IP. I know, Laura, you're seeing activity there, and obviously litigation. So these are all tools you can use. So I hope this was interesting and insightful to you all in some way. I know we didn't get to every question that we got. There were some, I think, overlapping questions about, action steps law firm leaders and consultants can take pre-merger to ensure a common and harmonious culture. I don't know that there's such a thing as harmonious culture at a law firm. Scott Love, thank you for asking that question. I do appreciate that. And we've got some questions about, I think I'll have you answer these maybe offline, Kent, about as a recruiter, how you can be proactive to broker a deal more. I think that's more nuanced, but I want to be mindful of your time and of our audience's time. And thank you all for being on this. Again, to be able to, tap into your expertise is wonderful. And Tom, congratulations on this merger. Ken, you put them together. So it's pretty extraordinary.
It's all Tom. Tom deserves all the credit for that.
And
Tom
I know
and his partners.
Your co-managing partner, it's pretty extraordinary in the time of a pandemic to have done this. So hopefully you'll be able to celebrate in person one of these days, and to be able to tap into Wendy and Laura's expertise again is just terrific. So we will have a replay of this and a takeaways piece. And so our next webinar next month, I guess is September, which is like, somebody said there's 50 days until fall, which I was like, oh gosh, that's terrible. It's going to be about diversity, because we are still not where we should be in diversity. So we're going to have a number of heads of diversity, and we're going to talk about why we're not where we should be and where we should be. So stay tuned for more information on that. And we've got a general counsel webinar coming up with a survey, which is going to be great. We're going to survey thousands of GCs. So stay tuned for that. If your firm would like a sample merger report, the one that Laura showed, we can confidentially, so Leopard can confidentially give you one of those just for fun, just to see how your firm might do. Again, the human factor is a big part of it, but you can contact Laura or Phil. Flora will put his contact information in the follow-up email. So thank you guys, and join us for the next webinar, and enjoy the rest of the summer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Go on.
Bye.
Bye.